And I give you the bad news first, because everybody's got to see the bad news. And if you've got teeth, which is an issue in some quarters, there are a number of things that live in your gums, and they look. This is a one-celled animal. It's swimming in a sea of bacteria. It's crawling into the plaque that's around your teeth. There's snakes and pollywogs and frogs and all kinds of stuff crawling around. And this is in the middle of the screen is you can see a bunch of spirochetes, little snake-looking guys have jumped on a white blood cell. They're eating it alive. This fellow in the middle here is Mr. Potato Head. It's an amoeba. I think he's looking at us, don't you? And what's inside it is actually white blood cells, because that's what it eats. And what's living in a sea of is the spirochetes. Spirochetes are really nasty bacteria. Here's an amoeba that just ate this white blood cell here. And that's what they eat for lunch. Well, what that does is causes enormous amounts of inflammation. You didn't get these yesterday. You've had them most of your life. When we do DNA testing on the bacteria, we find that they came from your mother, or your caregiver, or your lover, or your dog. So it's mothers, lovers, and dogs. So these are communicable organisms that eat us alive. But the good thing is they're real small, they eat us very slowly, and then they crawl into your bloodstream and they can cause blisters in your arteries, and then you get a heart attack or a stroke. So you got to be really generous to give them your body for food. And thank you very much for feeding the bacterial population of the world. And you can tell if you're providing nutrition to these organisms if your gums bleed when you brush them vigorously. Why? Because the snake guy eats skin so it can eat your blood. And that's what it likes best, is to live in your bloodstream. So that's what they're doing. So one of the things you want to do is to nuke them. It's just that simple. And bacteria are easy to kill. They are very fragile little things, and lots of things kill them. Spirochete, for example, oxygen will kill it. And oxygen, isn't that the thing we breathe on? So they're kind of the antithesis of what is good for us, aren't they? They can't stand oxygen, so one of the things you can do is give them lots of oxygen. And that would be with peroxide, or you can, if you have an ozonator, you can bubble it through some sort of oil like olive oil, or even better yet, oil of oregano, which kills them also. So then all of a sudden now you've got herbals, oil of oregano, and a nutrient, oxygen, going after them. Then what else can you kill them? Oh, how about iodine? Yeah, they can't stand iodine either. And so you can put a little iodine in there. But notice that they're all swimmers. So wait a minute, what if I'm flossing? Well, what you got to do is you'd have to put a little bait on the end of that floss, use a little hook, and pull about 100 million. So you're going to be the busiest fisherman on the planet. So maybe you could take the nuclear approach to them and just put something in the saliva that they don't like that you do. Well, how would you do that? That would be called a water pick. So then you put something in the water pick that squirts around. I'm going to show you my recipe for oral health. And I'm going to show you how to make up your own solution, put it in the water pick, squirt it around, and you change the water they live in, the saliva that they live in, to water that's been dosed with ozone, iodine, salt, baking soda. Anything they don't like is something you want to get plenty of. And I will tell you that you will not hear me telling you to put fluoride on, because fluoride actually accelerates this disease process.
Here's my simple recipe for oral health. First, you take 1 large mason jar. Glass is best, but plastic will do. Then add 1 inch of salt and 1 inch of baking soda. Now pour in enough hot water to fill up the jar, and then mix it. Now set it under the sink and let all that unused salt and soda sink to the bottom before you use it. Grit in your irrigating solution will plug your water irrigator, so let the grit settle out. Next, you can begin your normal oral hygiene procedures such as flossing, toothbrushing with the bass brush, toothpicking, to stir up the gooey bacteria that grows on the teeth and clogs up the gums. Once the grit has settled to the bottom, you've made what's called a saturated salt solution, but it's really too strong. So now you can dilute it 50-50 with warm water, and the temperature will be just perfect. You can add a splash of iodine if you like, but now you're ready to irrigate. Check the power setting to make sure it's on low, and you're going to use the big tip, which you can point in between your teeth one at a time all around your mouth, first outside and then inside. The reason you're using the low setting is that you're not doing a car wash. You do not need to blast these bacteria off your teeth, and just as we showed you in the earlier part, you can blast them into your bloodstream too. You don't want to do that. You just want to rinse them away gently with a good firm stream of water. Once you've finished with the irrigator, you need to rinse out the irrigator or it won't run next time. Salt will plug it up. So, all you got to do is run some fresh water through the irrigator before you put it away.
Public health workers had noticed that the people in certain localities had exceptionally good teeth. Many had no cavities at all. This was true in parts of Texas, the Middle West, and other areas. Careful study determined that it was fluoride, naturally present in the drinking water, which was responsible for these healthier teeth. In an effort to make this protection available to everyone, Dr. Bibby studied the effects of fluoride when applied directly to the teeth. Other workers investigated the addition of fluoride to the water supplies.
In World War II, they used copious quantities of fluoride to extract uranium in order to make the bomb. And Harold Hodge, the head of the toxicology division of the Manhattan Project, went down to where they were making the bomb, and some of the workers had become mentally confused after being exposed to their fluoride compounds. And they were staggering around, salivating, unable to make coherent sentences. It was neurotoxic. And Harold said in 1944, this is obviously neurotoxic. It's a place where only people of color should work. Harold's solution to a toxic environment was, let them work there. Oh, not my fellows, but we'll let them work there. So what came out in 1948 was the results of having them work there. And that it was a wonderful article in the Journal of the American Dental Association about how their oral health had benefited so much from being exposed to this powerful poison. And their teeth were beautiful, white and shiny, and they had very little cavities. Matter of fact, the number of cavities they had went down. What happened that was 1948. It was based upon data from 1945. 50 years later, top secret only lasts for 50 years. So 50 years later, the government didn't realize that they'd been lying so long and inadvertently allowed the data to slide out. And what did the data show? The reason their tooth decay went down is because their teeth fell out. I don't think that's a benefit. So if we allow industry to manipulate the scientific literature by lying to us, hiding data with government stamps of top secret. What was top secret about that study? The secret was it's extremely harmful and it's going to hurt you. So we better cover that up for 50 years, and they've succeeded. Now, that came out in 1995. There was a book about it. It's called, by Christopher Bryson, called The Fluoride Deception. The guy that dug that paper out of the archives of the government was Cliff Honaker. And he was the investigator both for Christopher Bryson and the fluoride deception. These are books, write them down, that's your reading list. And, or if you can't read, you can catch an interview with Christopher Bryson on YouTube. It's in 3 parts because it's been up there for a number of years. Now you can put the whole thing on, but it's called The Fluoride Deception. And Cliff Honaker basically found a lot of other data that involved our friend Dr. Hodge. And Dr. Hodge wasn't just worried about teeth. He was worried about the Manhattan Project. And he also was worried about how much radiation it took to kill people. So what he did is in Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester, New York, a private civilian hospital, during the Nuremberg trials, while we're hanging Nazis for doing experiments without informed consent on prisoners in Auschwitz and other places, he selected 48 people for murder and injected them in groups of 6, 3 different doses of plutonium, so there's 18 people went away right there, uranium, thorium, radioactive lead, and 1 got away. Mary Connell was injected with 184 micrograms of bomb-grade uranium. Now, if you tried to go through New York with a suitcase with 184 micrograms of bomb-grade uranium, I can tell you for absolute certain you would set off every radiation alarm in that New York airport, because there is no way anybody on the planet had 184 micrograms of bomb-grade uranium except the Manhattan Project in 1946. That's a lot of uranium. And God reached down to Mary Connell and said, "I'm sorry about this, Mary, but you're not going to die." And she didn't, but she was sick. And in the 1990s, in the middle 90s, she had been going to the doctors again and again and again, and they didn't know what was wrong with her, but she had chronic kidney problems and on and on. And finally, she went to a urologist, and he said, "Mary, what we need to do is a very modern test. It's called an IVP, and we'll do just a little tiny bit of radioactive iodine, and we'll put that in your system, and it'll deposit where in your kidney, and it'll show us exactly what the architecture of your kidney is, and we can see what's causing all your health problems." And she said, "Well, do it, Doc. I've been sick for 50 years." And so they ran the IVP for her, and she is so hot in 1995 with radiation from Dr. Hodge's attempt that she fogged the whole film. She is highly radioactive. She couldn't walk through the New York terminal where the radiation sensors are, even to this day. And they said, "Did you work at the nuclear power plant?" And she says, "No, I've been sick since November of 1946. And they said, "Interesting, you should know that." And she said, "Well, I remember it to this day." And she said, "I was 22 years old, young and healthy. I weighed 80 pounds. And you remember in 46, big was beautiful. And I was a skinny little person. And so I asked my physician, how do I increase my body size?" And he said, "Well, we need to put you in the hospital to the Strong Memorial Hospital metabolic ward, a new ward that has just recently been set up by the great scientists, and we'll study your physiology." And she went in there and they took tests on her, and they found that she was a robust, healthy young woman with nothing wrong whatsoever. And her tests were intercepted by the ghouls, and the director of the ghouls is the person whose name is Harold Hodge, who in my opinion is the director of the fluoridation projects also, because his name appears all over the studies that allege there's a benefit. So anyway, selected Mary Connell for murder with uranium. And in 1995, Hazel O'Leary, the head of the Energy Department, whose other name used to be Atomic Energy Commission, whose other name used to be the Manhattan Project. You see how we change the names on stuff and you just forget what it is? Well, Manhattan Project, Energy Department, El Mismo, and we've got yet a new name now. There's also people worried about oil too. So Hazel O'Leary apologized to Mary Connor. And she also apologized to 16 families who were injected with plutonium. Well, now, wait a minute. Didn't I just say 18 people got plutonium? And there's only 16 families in the room. What happened to the other 2? Well, the reason those 16 families were in the room, because you got to go read a book. It got a Pulitzer Prize. It's called The Plutonium Files, that goes through in some details how a little cub reporter from the Albuquerque Tribune read in the paper in 1977 that they were going to try to clean up the animal carcasses at Los Alamos. And she said, oh, they dropped a bomb on the deer. And she sent a Freedom of Information Act out to find out what kind of animals had been killed. And she found out it wasn't wild animals, it was dogs, rats, and mice, and all manner of creatures. And when she was reading through this with her fine-tooth comb, she came across this little note. The rat study with plutonium agreed well with the human, Cal 1. She said, they're doing this on humans too. And so she sent another Freedom of Information Act and said, I'd like to know all of the information on Cal 1. And they said, no, you can't have that. She knew she had a hook. And she kept reeling in. She discovered on her own who 16 of the people that were murdered with plutonium were. That's why Hazel O'Leary apologized to him. I have in my library the Plutonium Files. I read about it because Christopher Bryson and Cliff Honaker were talking about it. I read about it, couldn't find it. I went to the bookstore, couldn't find it. I went to all the bookstores, couldn't find it. Finally, I found it on Amazon.com used. Cost me $1. And so I bought a bunch of them. But I kept the one that was from the United States Army Library. It's a library book. Beautiful, hard copy. I opened it up. It had never been checked out. So when you say, oh, water fluoridation has been proven safe by hundreds of studies, then the next question you say is, well, how many of those studies were done by the mass murderer of the Manhattan Project? And they'll go, oh, you must believe in chemtrails. Now remember, there are 3 rules to public relations. The way you get people to ignore all that's going on, the first rule is you denigrate the source. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Ah, yeah, you think they killed people in the Manhattan Project or something. And then you denigrate their information. Oh, it's junk science. It's just garbage. They make it up. They got the propeller hats. They're making this stuff up. And then you cite authority. It's recommended by the Manhattan Project and the nuclear power plant people and the Atomic Energy Commission and all the people that got the stuff to get rid of. And what's amazing about that is it works. It works each time, every time. When you take the big problem that they had with the Manhattan Project was getting rid of the fluoride. And they had another problem. That when you run a bulldozer into a mountain and you pull out the uranium, you have tons and tons and tons of leftover phosphate and gypsum, plaster of Paris. So what are you going to do with that? Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take the plaster of Paris and put paper on either side of it and we build houses out of it. We'll call it drywall. Excellent. And what do we do with the phosphate? Let's put it in bags, give it to the gardeners and the farmers, and they spread it all over their tomatoes, and they make these great big tomatoes that don't taste like anything. And because we buy food by the pound, we can make that plant really thirsty. It'll suck up a lot of water, and then we can get a lot of money for selling water. And that'll make agribiz rich, because we can sell them this hazardous waste, leftover phosphate, and it'll make the plants thirsty, and we can sell water for the cost of food. What do you think? Oh, I guess that's America today, isn't it? Well, and then what are we going to do with the fluoride? That's a toughie. Well, let's phony up some studies showing that fluoride exposure improves oral health And then we'll tell America it's good for the kiddies. And we'll put it in the water. So look at those programs. They're called spread it thin, spread it far. Spread it thin, spread it far, spread it thin, spread it far. That's their solution to pollution, was dilute it in your drinking water. Dilute it in your farmlands. Dilute it in your household by spreading it around the buildings, spreading it around the world. Spread it out. Well, the problem is they were so good at that lie is that we're not making a lot of use of the uranium anymore. As a matter of fact, one of the problems is because they're not extracting the uranium from the ore anymore, and they're making so much money selling the stuff, that they've continued to run the bulldozer in the mountain and take put the phosphate in and bring the phosphate and put it on the farms and then have the hydrofluoric acid to sell to the cities, and they've made a profit out of this hugely polluting industry. And they're not willing to fess up to the fact that they were lying day one.
Water. Well, to put it very simply, fluoride is safe at 1 part per million. Now, we sometimes say, is fluoride poison? Yes, of course it's a poison in large doses, just like ordinary table salt is a poison in large doses. But the amount of fluoridated water, drinking water, that would have to be consumed to be fatally poisonous would be 50 bathtubs full.
If you knew that industry, with the help of their moneyed friends in elected positions, was going to add to the public water supply a substance that damaged the IQ of your children, produced Down syndrome babies in young women, increased the blood lead level in the children, caused violent crime, would impair the thyroid function in almost any size of child, but especially an iodine deficient infant. If you knew that, what would you do? And the first answer I got was, I'd buy bottled water. Oh, that's no good. Well, that protects your lips. But are you also going to buy a bulletproof house? Are you going to hire more teachers to teach remedial education? Are you going to arm the police with automatic weapons? Are you going to build a prison on every corner in this country? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. Because if you only protect your lips and you don't protect your country, you end up looking like America today, with skyrocketing healthcare costs that are a direct cause of swallowing hazardous waste in the drinking water, and brushing your teeth with hazardous waste, and exposing yourself to hazardous waste in your shower. Well, whenever you hear the word flu, F-L-U-O, you're talking fluoride. Flux, what's that? That's a fluoride compound to remove the debris when you're welding. How about Prozac? Isn't that called fluoxetine? Oh, that's a fluoride compound. And how about fen-phen and phenfluramine, the ones that ate the little skinny people's hearts? Oh, that's a fluoride compound also. How about Cipro that crippled the postal workers? Oh, that's a fluoride antibiotic. So there's a widespread use of fluoride in so many things you cannot even begin to imagine where it is. And because it's so widespread, industry is reveling in their glory. They're saying, well, you can't prove that my fluoride caused that problem. It could have been you brushed your teeth. Or it could have been you drank iced tea. Or it could have been you ate the pesticide that was on the vegetables. It could have been anything. And it's certainly, you can't prove it was me. And so this whole program is about preventing you from proving that that caused this. Because in that rests the liability. Do you realize that fluoride is the most costly air pollutant in America? It damages more cattle, more animals, and more crops than any other element. So they began the lie long before the Manhattan Project, but they've been very successful, haven't they? You go to any school in the San Diego County, And if they've been hooked up with the Dental Society, they've got a rinse and spit program where these kids are trying to learn. You give them a mouthful of fluoride that would make them puke if they swallowed every morning so that we can harden their little teeth. And then they can't read. You just wonder where Alan Fudd is when you need him. What is fluoride's appropriate role in the prevention of caries based on the current understanding of science? It cripples people. Here's Louis Jeudy, and this is part of a video that is available for those people that like it. It's played on public access TV here in San Diego a number of times. It's called China's Battle with Crippling Water. And Dr. Gao is standing behind Louis, showing that Louis's head will not move any more than it is right now. It's as far to the right as Louis can turn his head. Anybody got a stiff neck? So fluoride accumulates in your spine, your joints. He can also, that's his arm is as straight as it'll go. It won't fully straighten out. If you look at him, he's bent over like this. Louis is about 38. So if you're that blasted by the time you're 38, you know, he's going to be ruined by the time he's 50. So, and skeletal fluorosis also has an early stage called soft tissue fluorosis. Soft tissue fluorosis is where you get a joint that is a little stiff, or if you raise your hand in class and you can't get your arm over your head. Well, what if you can't straighten your arm all the way out? All those are soft tissue fluorosis. It happens in this country a lot. 60 million Americans have what they call arthritis. How much of that is from fluoride? It's hard to say, probably a lot. Increased risk of hip fracture. Hip fracture often kills the person, maybe not that day, but in a short amount of time. You can't take old people and put them on their back for any length of time. Fortunately, now that we have these $30,000 operations where we can pop you up and put a bionic hip in there, we can get you up out of bed so they're not dying like they used to. In 15, 20 years ago, before they had that operation, the chances of you ever getting out of the hospital alive was 11%. That's pretty severe, isn't it? Well, why is this happening? Well, fluoride accumulates in the bone and it poisons the bone. The same reason we're advocating to put it on our teeth, because it's a tremendously powerful poison. Put it on your teeth, it'll make those little bacteria in your teeth choke to death. Well, what happens if it absorbs through your skin, gets in your system, swallowed? Well, that'll make the cells on your bones choke to death. Oh, well, that might make the bone weak. How about thyroid suppression? What happens when you suppress the thyroid is you end up with obese people and children and heart disease and cancer. Does that sound like America today?